Welcome to the BankTalk podcast, the show where we talk to leaders and experts from the community banking sector. Whether you are a current CEO or aspire to be one, this podcast will give you valuable insights and advice on how to run your financial institution better. Each episode explores a new topic with a guest who brings their unique experience and knowledge. Tune in and discover something new each time you listen.
Hello, and welcome to Bank Talk. I'm Jordan Kelly, your host and consultant at Remedy Consulting. Today, we're talking about a recent study on credit card signups, which found that loyalty and rewards programs are the top influencing factor when choosing a card provider. I'm sitting down with Beth McCoy, the CEO of Cora Loyalty. Beth has over 20 years of experience in building loyalty and rewards programs and proving value to FIs beyond growing share of wallet. So without further ado, let's dive into our discussion. Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you on Bank Talk.
Great to be here, Jordan. Great to meet you.
So, Beth, we wanted to talk a little bit about loyalty programs and specifically how they relate to community banks, but I know you've got a lot of experience in this space. So can you just tell me a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, of course. So I actually started my career in the airline industry, Jordan. So that's where I was first exposed to loyalty, working alongside the teams that managed the airline's loyalty program. And one of those colleagues later moved into a loyalty firm outside of the airline and eventually pulled me into what I like to call the wild and wonderful world of loyalty. So nearly 20 years later, I built real deep expertise in developing comprehensive loyalty solutions that really drive results for clients. So along the way, I helped launch and scale 2 loyalty startups and worked with a number of large global brands. And that's primarily across financial services and travel. Last year, I stepped into the role of CEO of Cora Loyalty, and I'll just give you a little bit of background, just what Cora Loyalty is. So it's really a complete loyalty ecosystem. We brought together industry-leading capabilities from 3 really well-established legacy brands in the loyalty space and brought all of that sort of knowledge and technology and services into a single unified platform and offering. And it's really designed to support loyalty end-to-end. So from earning to engagement to redemption. The platform itself is intentionally flexible and modular. So it means that clients can sort of use exactly what they need when they need it, rather than being forced into sort of that giant one-size-fits-all solution. It scales really easily from small to medium-sized businesses right up to large enterprises. And we span across B2C and B2B use cases. So when you combine the tech, the rewards marketplace, and sort of our services layer of data sciences and digital marketing, what you get really is a fully integrated earn and burn loyalty ecosystem.
It's interesting because I think the term loyalty can encompass so much, and especially sometimes it even depends by vertical, exactly, kind of what that means. So I want us to start at just a very high level. When we're talking about loyalty or rewards programs, in your opinion, what does that encompass specifically in the space of financial services or banks?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about loyalty and rewards programs, we're really talking about how a company builds and sustains a long-term relationship with its customers. So it's really not just about the points or the perks. It's really about recognizing and rewarding the behaviors that matter most to the business. So whether that's spend or engagement or advocacy of the brand itself or tenure. So I think at their best, loyalty programs that really create a clear value exchange when they make those customers feel genuinely recognized, the customers see value, the business benefits from those deeper, more durable relationships. And so that can show up through the rewards that we talked about, status, personalized experiences. But really the common thread is that relevance to the member and building the trust with the members. So I think also we're seeing, and I know we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later, is sort of loyalty is really about the broader ecosystem as well. It's really about how brands use the data, their partnerships, and also the technology to make loyalty feel seamless and meaningful across all those channels over time. So I think loyalty isn't really a it's not sort of that feature or just a one-time blitz campaign. It's really an infrastructure for relationships that supports that long-term growth.
And, in the space of, banking, I think I think it's become more and more of a conversation around where and when do loyalty programs get added, and at a community banking level, how applicable is, one of those services and to the various communities. But what I actually thought was so interesting, so recently your team conducted a survey of
Mhm.
US adults. You guys were kind of digging into how are adults influenced to engage specifically with card providers. I know you guys looked at a number of different factors and across a number of age groups. Can you tell me, give me the overview of that survey and what you found?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we recently partnered with the Harris Poll to survey about 2,000 adults in the U.S. And really, the purpose was to understand what drives engagement with card providers. And one key finding is that loyalty and rewards really remain the single most influential factor in that engagement. So in 2025, half of Americans said that loyalty and rewards programs were the top reason they choose a credit card. And this ranks ahead of convenience and credit limits and fees, interest rates, and even security was in there. Excuse me. And this shows that rewards aren't just a sort of a nice to have; they're really central to the consumer decision making and top of wallet performance. So generally, baby boomers are the most influenced by loyalty and rewards, followed by Gen X and millennials. Gen Z is less influenced overall, but loyalty still matters. It just manifests a little bit differently. So, for example, about 40% of Americans value rewards that reflect their personal shopping habits, especially millennials, Gen X, and boomers. But Gen Z is on the other hand is more motivated by those surprise and delight perks that immediate gratification and that unexpected reward that feels fun. So I think the takeaway really for card providers is that loyalty works across all generations, but it's not in that one size fits all way. So programs that are combining that strong earned value with the personalization and those moments of delight are really what resonate most today.
You know what I thought was so interesting when I was looking at this survey is that not that it's a surprise to me personally that loyalty and rewards, rank so high in the decision factors kind of across generations, but that it consistently showed up higher than even fees or security when it came to choosing a card. That was actually a very interesting finding for me.
It is, but it's a real telling factor that of how important loyalty is to a company's overall strategy.
So remind me real quick, what were the factors you guys were looking across? It was loyalty and rewards, security, fees. I think there were a couple of others in there.
Convenience, credit limits, interest rates, those were some of the factors that we were looking
Gotcha.
at in the yeah.
And so I know that you guys have conducted this survey or a similar survey for at least the past couple of years. I, whether it's findings directly from your survey or from research that's out there, how has the influence of these factors changed over the past 3 to 5 years when it comes to new card signups?
Yeah, so building on those findings, we have seen a shift over that sort of 5-year time frame, and so it's just rewards have moved from being a differentiator to table stakes. So in many cases, people the primary reason we talked about that this is why consumers choose and continue to use a card. We've also seen like economic pressures have made people more intentional about their spending, and rewards are increasingly seen as a way to stretch value and not just earn perks. And I think we saw that a lot in the pandemic as well, where we saw a spike in just overall interaction with loyalty programs as people were trying to be more intentional about their spending. So those factors, like you just mentioned, the credit limits, interest rates, and fees, that's declined in influence. It's not like they don't matter, but they're not really that main driver of engagement when comparable products are available. So the perceived value and relevance of the product has grown significantly, and customers really want rewards that are transparent and attainable and aligned with their everyday lives. One other key factor is also that personalization has become more important. A few years ago, you might have heard a little bit about it, but it's definitely on trend and au courant right now that people expect rewards that really reflect their actual spending patterns rather than just sort of that generic earn and burn model. So while the shifts are consistent across generations, I think the expression differs a little bit. So the older generations, the baby boomers we talked about, really value that reliability and clear value. Well, those younger customers are looking for that immediacy, the flexibility, and those moment of surprise that we talked about. So, common thread across it all: loyalty just has to it has to feel worthwhile. That's always been the case, but I think the bar has risen really meaningfully in recent years.
I want to go back to something that you just mentioned. So you touched briefly on personalization. So
Mhm.
what does maybe you have the data on this and maybe you don't, but what does personalization mean across these generations? Like what does personalization mean and how does it show up in importance to a baby boomer versus a millennial versus a Gen Z?
We'll be right back.
Ever feel like your tech budget's running the show instead of supporting it? You're not alone. Between bloated vendor contracts and outdated systems, a lot of banks are stuck paying more for less. And here's the kicker: those big tech vendors, their contracts are built to protect them, not you. So if you're hesitating to make bold moves because of tech costs, it's time to flip the script. That's where Remedy Consulting comes in. We help banks take back control, cutting through the fine print, optimizing spend, and finding tech solutions that actually fuel growth. And we're offering a free review of your tech stack, spending, and vendor contracts. No pressure, no sales pitch, just expert insight to help you make smarter decisions. Even if we're not the right fit, you'll walk away with clarity and confidence. So go to remedyconsult.net or call 206-295-5776. Let's make your tech work for you, not against you. Thanks for listening to the Bank Talk podcast.
So it's really just meeting the member where they are at. So, like I mentioned, baby boomers tend to go for more of those tangible rewards. The millennials are tending towards more rewards or personalization that ties into like subscription and dining, so that more that kind of where they're at in their lifestyle. And then Gen Z, of course, is those sort of surprise and delight. It's immediate. You just get a free coffee or you suddenly get to earn here. So it's personalization really is just speaking to where the member is at, speaking to them where they're at. I think is the best way to put it.
And I think it's interesting to me. So I fall into the, millennial generation. And I will tell you, my most used card is my card that gives me a lot of travel rewards because personally, I like to take big trips.
Yeah.
And I, love when those trips are majorly free because I've racked up, enough rewards to make that happen. So it's just such an interesting and I think very apropos topic, in today's day and age.
Yeah, I think it's the tailored rewards. So if you're tending towards spend on the card that gives you the travel perks, then that data has to be there to give you all of the ancillary benefits around doing what you like to do most.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me shift our focus a little bit. Many of our listeners are specifically from the community banking space, and in my experience, community banks they all have a debit card.
Mhm.
They but many don't offer a credit card. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but talk to me a little bit about would a loyalty program like this work in a debit card space? Or is it, in your opinion, kind of specifically tailored to credit cards?
No, definitely a loyalty program can work in the debit card space, and especially for community banks. It just needs a bit of a different approach than sort of traditional credit card rewards. So debit, obviously the most frequently used payment method for community bank customers. So it's a great engagement channel. It's just the debit interchange is lower, as all of your listeners will know, and rewards are getting more difficult to fund overall. So loyalty programs, the traditional ones, have relied on historically on that interchange revenue to fund the rewards, and that's coming under increasing pressure. So especially for those singular card-based programs. So where we're seeing debit base loyalty really succeed is when banks move beyond treating it kind of as that product reward and using it more as a broader relationship strategy, which obviously is a key factor and a key element of community banking, that deep relationship that they have with their members. So institutions are shifting from card-centric programs more to enterprise loyalty. So rewarding customers for activities across the full banking relationship, such as maintaining accounts, regular transactions, using multiple products, and really building that long-term tenure. So I think this approach is really well suited to community banks. It's not just about card spend, it's those deeper outcomes like growing deposits, encouraging adoption of additional services, and really strengthening that trust over time. And debit becomes one of those key touch points within that basket of tools, not just the sole driver of value. So I mentioned the interchange piece, Jordan, and so we're
Mhm.
also seeing banks lean a bit more heavily on partner funded rewards to make this model sustainable. So leveraging their relationships with partners such as retailers and grocery chains, fuel providers, and even travel brands, which appeals to you, really to help subsidize rewards and make them more relevant and more frequent. So that's a critical piece to look at when institutions just simply can't issue more points. So in a nutshell, yes, loyalty works in the debit space, but the banks that win are the ones that will treat loyalty really as key to that relationship infrastructure, not just a card feature. So, and I think for the community banks, as we talked about, it's just a natural extension of how they already do business, the reliance on strengthening relationships with their members.
Well, and I'm glad you touched on the interchange piece because it's always an important topic. I think these days it's a little bit more of a hot topic because it has come under fire quite a bit lately. And of course, particularly in the community banking space, there is a lot of reliance on that interchange revenue. And then, of course, the strategy around putting it back to work. So I do think it's a very appropriate topic to be having, especially in conjunction with this. But to your point of, the need, if you want to be successful in a loyalty program, really have to look at it enterprise wide rather than in I guess almost a one and done category.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that looking at how that benefits the FI overall, and
Mhm.
it's a question of when loyalty stops being that nice to have, and it becomes a real commercial growth lever for banks. So, I think when consumers perceive real value in a program, the first impact is that increased wallet share. So they consolidate more of their everyday spend with the institution where they feel rewarded and recognized, or they're getting their travel perks like Jordan, rather than spreading those transactions across multiple cards or accounts. So that leads to higher transaction volume, increased spend per customer, and the rewards don't just influence that sign up, as we've talked about. That really shapes the ongoing behavior. So a customer who actively engages with rewards, they tend to use their cards more frequently over time, and that just overall that consistency compounds into a meaningful revenue lift for the bank. So, but it goes beyond transactions. It deepens that banking relationship. And, if customers have rewards tied to multiple products, they're more likely to stay and adopt additional products, maybe be a little less price sensitive, but it does directly improve retention and lifetime value.
I think I always think it's good to be, because really what I heard is, we know, you conducted a study, we know that consumers find a lot of value in loyalty rewards programs. That's what they're
Yep.
looking for these days in their cards. But the key to flipping it to, what's important to the banker, and really, and, seeing that, knowing that you've seen that increase in the wallet size, increase or wallet share, increase in the transaction volumes. I mean, those are, again, specific to the card space. But then again, across the bank, I think really leaning to things like a growth in deposits, broader banking products, both sign up and retention. I mean, I think all of those, it really kind of goes back to that development of a self-feeding ecosystem.
Yeah, I think for financial institutions and community banks especially, it really means loyalty. Another way to grow profitably without relying solely on new customers acquisition. So you're increasing the value of the customers you already have by encouraging more engagement and usage and a real stronger emotional attachment to the brand. I think there's that old adage, it's far more economical to keep the customers that you have than to try and go out and acquire new ones. So increased wallet share, transaction volume, and spend matter. But I think for banks, it's also really getting that relationship depth. The loyalty programs really work best when they grow that entire relationship, not just the card usage.
Absolutely. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about, what suggestions would you have for community banks who are looking to start their own loyalty program? Maybe they haven't started down this road yet. They're kind of at the starting block. So, what suggestions do you have? And even from a high level, in your opinion and in your experience, what kind of infrastructure does it take for a bank to be able to support a program like this?
Yeah. So I think probably, and in my experience in talking to smaller banks, there's always some sort of element already there that can be used as a foundation. But I think my key factor in this is simplicity. So we already know that the customers value that trust and transparency and ease. So the program has to be really easy to understand, easy to use, and really clearly tied to banking behavior. So if customers don't know how to earn or use the rewards, they're not going to use it. I mean, that's just human
Mhm.
nature. If it's too complicated, you're not going to bother with it. So with like kind of the basic cashback or card rewards that community banks already have, it's a good starting point. So where we see the biggest impact is when the rewards are also relevant to the financial lives. So applying rewards to loan payments or insurance premiums, savings products, or just even those everyday purchases. So that flexibility reinforces the bank's role kind of as that long time financial partner and not just a transaction provider. And I think one other thing, because I've also in some of my conversations with banks or with members, they go, I've been with this bank for 25 years and I didn't even know they had a loyalty program. So I think it's really also key to have an awareness strategy and the suitable marketing strategy to make people aware of the fact that this actually is there and how to get the most benefit of it. From an infrastructure, you asked about what kind of support or what kind of resources would a bank need to put into this. I think this is something that banks need to be really thoughtful about how they approach this. Building everything in-house can be really, really costly and difficult to sustain over time, especially with limited internal resources. I've seen clients that have tried to do this and then the program just becomes stagnant over time because they don't have some of the knowledge or even the budget to maintain all of the pieces of a loyalty program in-house. On the other hand, I think fully outsourcing is also I'm not too keen on that either because I think that the the bank then loses control of the customer experience and their overall brand, which is inherent certainly for community banks. So in my experience, a hybrid approach works best. So the bank retains ownership of the customer relationship and the brand and the strategy, and then partnering with a loyalty technology provider that can handle that sort of complexity scale. And what's key is that ongoing innovation to keep the program fresh. So that model allows banks to compete with larger institutions without losing what makes them unique. And it just helps build out that tool that will deepen those relationships and support the long-term growth in the community.
So if I'm kind of last question here for you here, but
Yeah.
if I'm the CEO or I'm the CIO of a community FI, what are the initial questions I should be asking myself? Or I guess in your experience, are there specific factors that a bank should have before they decide to pursue kind of a more disciplined loyalty program approach? Things like, I mean, maybe even some basic building blocks along the lines of, is there a set institution size? Are there should we have other, cards programs already in place? Things along those lines. Is there anything there that you recommend that FIs have in place before kind of pursuing this?
I don't think in terms of size that necessarily matters, Jordan. I think what I would say though is you have to be if you do launch this program, it's really essential that we go back to making sure that you can fund and deliver that value to the customers. I think you could really start at any time, even if we've worked with clients where they've already got sort of a large program in place, but it's kind of become stale and old and they just want to refresh it. So that's where we can come in and look at those goals and the values. What are you hoping to get out of this? Is this a long-term retention tool? Are we trying to build on some acquisition elements to it as well? And then we can start figuring out how we craft the program overall to help the organization achieve its goals.
I think that makes sense. So, Beth, I think I've taken up a lot of your time today, but I do really appreciate the conversation. Any last thoughts or any last points we want to make sure we're getting across to our audience?
We talked about this. I think loyalty is just for some people it's really mystifying. So I've talked to people at different trade shows, and they're like, "I've always wanted to get into loyalty, and I didn't know where to start." So there are organizations out there that are certainly tailored and ready to help put this in place. Loyalty is a key lever in a company's strategy, and there are the services and the providers out there to help build for it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Beth. I appreciate you, coming on and having the conversation because I do think I think it's interesting, but I also think it's really applicable. And to your point, I think a lot of times it can be a little bit confusing or scary if you think you don't know enough about it. So my hope is that this conversation just gave some of our listeners a little bit more information about what is out there and where to start.
Great. Well, it was great to be here with you, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's it for Bank Talk. Thank you for listening today. Have a good day and keep on learning.
Thank you for joining us on the Bank Talk podcast brought to you by Remedy Consulting. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please rate, review, and share our work with others. To stay up to date with future episodes, be sure to follow the show and turn on notifications. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.